I want to really welcome all of you for coming on to this incredibly significant conference. And the evidence of how significant this conference is the number of people who came on to it immediately on time when it was announced that it would be beginning. And it is a significant conference that we are doing on the day that we had initially scheduled to do the Blackest Back annual electoral school, where the coalition has assumed the responsibility of teaching how Africans, how to participate in the electoral process, if you want to participate in the electoral process, demystifying the whole electoral process as the only way that we can struggle, but recognizing that the vast majority of African people who participate in political life do so through the electoral process, so that it's necessary for us to intervene in that process, if only to bring the people out of it. So we had scheduled initially for St. Louis, Missouri, a 3-day school, actually 2 days, but the first day, which would have been yesterday, would have been a meet and greet, so that people would have had an opportunity to meet each other and to spend some time in St. Louis before the 2-day meeting that was scheduled for today and tomorrow. It became clear that it was going to be impossible to do an in-person school in St. Louis. And so the coalition, I think correctly, decided to postpone that school. Right now, it's scheduled for the first, I think the second week in June. And even that may be ambitious. But whether we do it in person the second week in June, or we have to use this platform, we are scheduled now to go to the second week in June. We'll see how things play out with this colonial virus as we move forward. We thought that it was important to do something in the interim, because one reason the school was important is the fact that this is the electoral season, the election season. And this presidential election is something that we feel is something that African people need to be discussing, because in some quarters there has been panic for a time now about the possibility of Trump being elected. There have been re-elected, rather. There have been possibilities of various forces characterized as leftists and socialists being elected. There's been a lot of discussion during this electoral season about things like socialism and reparations, and these are really important questions to us. So we felt like, and do feel it's important to intervene in that question. And though we won't be meeting on this day and tomorrow in St. Louis, we said that let's do this, let's have this Zoom conference so that we can at least speak to the question of the election and the implications for our struggle right now. And also this horrible manifestation of a colonial attack on us in the form of the virus. And I do say it's a colonial attack. COVID-19, I believe, could be more appropriately called a colonial virus. And I can say this because one reason we're paying attention to this virus, as opposed to the 300,000 Black people who died in Haiti through an earthquake, or the 2,000 who died or more through the Hurricane Katrina. The numbers of people, thousands who died at the mudslide in Sierra Leone. The reason we are having this discussion, despite the fact that the most notorious, crippling, destructive disease on the planet, in the history of the planet, is malaria. And that's laying waste to Black people all around the earth. But the reason this discussion is happening is not because of the numbers of people who are dying, but because who is dying. Because it is something that can also possibly affect white people and people among the colonial powers. This is not an attempt on my part to understate the significance of this virus, but I'm saying the reason we would characterize as the colonial virus is because every day we look up, every day we wake up, Black people are dying around this planet Earth from what is normal under our circumstances. And so I think that when we see what happens in Haiti, the destruction of infrastructure, when we see how even with this occurring, the U.S. government is involved in quarantining in Venezuela. They didn't quarantine Venezuela because of some kind of COVID-19. They quarantined Venezuela because Venezuela was moving to escape the grasp of colonialism. And the same thing can be said about Iran and other places, and how the U.S. is actually weaponizing this disease. And what is becoming clearer to us is that what we're looking at is a political problem. And the political problem is one that where African people do not have power over our own lives, so that we make the determination, and not the government in Louisiana, that we're going to now have this great number of Black people dying, that we make the determination that there is going to be health care. We're looking at a crisis of great proportion. This government, this social system has been in crisis for some time now. Even before this discussion, even before this so-called pandemic, we were watching the U.S. Ruling class talking about an existential crisis. The existential crisis was not COVID-19. The existential crisis was China becoming a great force in terms of challenging the hegemony of the United States economically and politically in various parts of the world. The existential crisis was Venezuela and all the people who live in the Americas who were taking control of their resources that led to the overthrow of Evo Morales by the United States government just recently. The existential crisis is in Syria and all those places where they are minimizing the significance and capacity of an illegitimate white nationalist state called Israel to control the resources and our people and other people there. So the U.S. has been experiencing what is an existential crisis for a while. And so to say that COVID-19 is the existential crisis, the real crisis is the struggle of the peoples. The real crisis for U.S. imperialism, for white power, is the struggle of the people to take back our resources and to take back our freedom, because imperialism itself is a parasite that sucks the blood of African and other peoples around the world. So we need to have this discussion, and that's why we're here today, to talk about the electoral process, to talk about what all of this stuff means, and to talk about COVID-19. And some of us are really busy on the ground. I'm really appreciative of this steering committee that we have. And everybody who is participating in this meeting should know that it's an extraordinarily powerful steering committee. These are not just people who talk about stuff, but people who've been in the trenches struggling for Black people for a long period of time and continue to struggle even during this crisis. There are people who are out in communities putting up posters in our community explaining COVID-19, telling people how to do stuff, because the people are not taking anything that Trump says or the U.S. government says, et cetera. And even this horrible person, Chris Cuomo, who was infected with the coronavirus, and makes such arrogant statements about how the significance of willpower, his willpower, et cetera, helped to overcome that. There ain't nobody on earth with more willpower than Black people. If we survive white power, if we've survived murder, mass imprisonment, and everything that's happening to us on a regular basis, Chris Cuomo, who didn't even have to go to the hospital came to him. With all of the resources, et cetera, that you got, you're going to talk about your willpower. There is no more willpower than you can find here. And what this meeting is about, what this conference is about, is coalescing this willpower and giving it some direction so that we can understand what the hell is going on. And then we can make people like Chris Cuomo and his brother, who is the governor of New York, and who, as he talks about how he wants to help people with dealing with COVID-19, et cetera, is passing a budget that minimize or liquidate Medicaid and other kinds of things that would actually help the people. This is our problem. When I say our problem is being colonized. We have to solve this problem. That's why we have to have this conference. And I want to welcome everybody. I want to welcome people who come from various places in this meeting. You will see from Louisiana, from New York, from Michigan, from Illinois, from Alabama, from Florida, from New Jersey. And I'm leaving out somebody, but from various places throughout the United States, you see members of this steering committee who are dedicated, and even in Colombia, that's where at least one comrade is speaking to us from Colombia in South America. And so we are determined, not only that we have survived, survival ain't enough. Survival ain't enough. We see this struggle that we're involved in to deal with this manifestation of colonialism that they call a virus. We negate colonialism. We, in the process of curing ourselves, healing ourselves, solving our problems, and replacing the ability of white power to intervene in our lives, we can only solve our problems through negation of the power of white people, white governments, etc., imperialist powers in the lives of Black people. So I want to just really express appreciation for everybody for coming on. We're going to win this one. And we're going to do all the stuff that they talk about in terms of being able to protect ourselves, protocols necessary. We're going to do those things. We will hear people talking about that in this meeting. We will hear people talking about how they want to use this process to implement even more violence from the state, the government, the police that shoots us down on a regular basis already. Now they've been given more authority to do it. I just saw something the other day called masking while Black. All of a sudden, it's incredible. Masking while Black. And, so you got on your mask now. Usually you're in trouble. You can't even wear a hoodie in certain sections of this country without getting gunned down, as we know, and now to put on mask. And if you don't have a mask, then they come and whoop you. If you do have on a hoodie or mask before, then they will whoop you or do something that's bad to you. We have to have the power. We are dealing with a colonial virus. It is a colonial virus. Colonialism is the disease, and Black power is the cure. So I want to appreciate everybody for being on, and welcome everybody, all of the participants, everybody who's come on. We've captured